Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Okay, so I was originally going to be continuing my discussion on Fabricator General Raskian today. However, I've had a lot of people asking for my spoiler thoughts and reaction to certain moments and things in the End and the Death Volume 3. So today we'll do a spoiler reaction talk to go along with the previous non-spoiler one I did earlier in the week. Now, this is not going to be the absolute every single minor spoiler Easter egg encyclopedia discussion. This is going to be the big talking points and reaction moments for me. After all these years, you know me by now, and you know the things I tend to like or dislike, the things I want to talk about and the things I generally don't. And I'm still processing my first read through here, so my opinions here may change in the weeks and months ahead, when we really sit down to discuss and debate these moments in depth in the years ahead. And it goes without saying, spoilers ahead here. As I always say, I really recommend reading the stories for yourself first, without spoilers, because that is truly the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself. And if there was ever a book that you're going to do that with, it's surely the very end of the Horus Heresy. So I get the desire, I get the need to know, but do yourself a favour. Have a little social media blackout for a while and just read and experience it for yourself. You will not regret it. But okay, so first up we saw Guilliman and the full force of the Ultramarines fleet advancing on the Solar Realm. Rabute still desperately trying to get any kind of response from Terra. They were only 9 hours away, and Rabute was just repeating over and over, all you need to do is hold on. With the complete and utter mess of the merge of real space and warp the entire region had become, the Ultramarines couldn't really see anything they were heading into. They just really needed a beacon, the Astronomicon, to be lit, so they could see it. And I thought this was an absolutely fantastic way to kick things off, because it immediately upped that tension. Guilliman's here. The Ultramarines are here. It is going down. But then the Ultramarines got an enemy signal, which turned out to be the Vengeful Spirit, which then got duplicated and duplicated and duplicated, until they were confronted with thousands upon thousands of Vengeful Spirits. Perhaps the most dangerous Gloriana class vessel out there. And I'll be honest, I thought we were going to see a fleet battle for the ages here. But instead, it was more of a cliffhanger moment. However, still kicking it off with Guilliman was great. We then got a little cameo appearance of Perturabo, seeing him and the Iron Warriors retreating from Terra. And this began sowing the seeds of his future ascension to demonhood. Of all the future demon primarchs, Perturabo's always been hard to see how he would end up there. However, here we began to see why. Perturabo was irate, trashing his chamber, angry that his inevitable victory over Rogel was not allowed to be proven, and angry that Horus had used him exactly the same way as their father. No thanks or appreciation ever given, and so Perturabo's thoughts began to lean to the Aphame blades. How they are purely weapons, so focused on their sole intent that they are almost sentient. He'd like to study one, even be one. And so the steps are begun for Perturabo, seeking to become nothing more than a pure living weapon. Again, another great little development. I'd still like to see Perturabo somehow not elevate to demonhood, but we know that's not going to happen. And this explanation and fall does make sense. Perturabo seeking to purge that other part of himself. how he could end up as some gargantuan dreadnought obliterator-esque monstrosity. It only further pushes Perturabo's fall into tragedy. Lorgar too we got a little sight of, off on another world somewhere, waiting out the end of the conflict. We got a little tease that he perhaps doesn't fully trust Erebus any longer, but not much else really. He's simply waiting for Horus to defeat the Emperor, and then see if he can truly become the aspect of chaos he needs to. The psychic backlash of the angel's death and rage overwhelming his sons was nicely done, feeling really primal. How they were just as much danger to their comrades as they were the enemy. Not something that's generally been considered and highlighted on the tales and legends of the Blood Angel's fall to rage and maddened countercharge. We know the mindless savages the rage inflicts on them, so they would absolutely turn on former friends also. A bit like a mirror to the angel's death, I felt this was a real nice kind of gritty, brutal reality to the legend, even having to see Rand defend himself from Ascalon. The Blood Angel's fall was grim, brutal and dark, not a glorious charge to victory, but a sorrowful effect of the loss of their Primarch. Exactly how it should have been. Now, there's an absolutely awesome couple of moments as the Emperor continued his journey to face Horus, in the warp-fused mess that had become reality. He was accompanied by Leto, Loken, and the custodian Kaikautus. One epic moment where he just charges an absolute mountain-sized demon, and absolutely eviscerates it, even saving and aiding his companions as he does so. And then an Emperor moment that will go down in history, as the group stood before an entire company of word-bearers, including Terminators and Siege Dreadnoughts. Leto cracked a joke that we can take 'em, and the Emperor was just like, yes we can, and proceeds to not only block all of the fire unleashed by the word-bearers, but then annihilates all of them, with his psychic power. Over 100 word-bearer legionaries, including Terminators and Siege Dreadnoughts, and the Emperor just annihilated them, leaving no trace except a mass of burnt ground. It's absolutely epic. And you've got to remember, this is a sighting of the Emperor's true power. He forsook the truly godlike powers he was assuming back in Volume 2. So this is the kind of power the Emperor has had throughout the Heresy and Great Crusade. For me, as I said in the non-spoiler reaction, it really just highlighted how crazy it was for any traitor Primarch to ever think they could have fought him. Even Magnus. The Emperor was just as beyond them as Primarchs are to Astartes, if not more so. His power was incredible. Now, Rogel Dawn, who had found and saved the Psyker Actae in Volume 2, is informed Sanguinius is dead and that Horus has become Chaos Undivided. And Rogel, the absolute legend that he is determined to get there and help the Emperor and face his brother anyway. And this was a really great little moment, because even having been told Horus killed Sanguinius, at the end of their conversation, Rogel asks again, is he really dead? Which just reveals how impactful the angel was to his brothers. It's a simple question, but from Rogel, in this moment, it's really telling of the hurt. As I said in the spoiler-free reaction, Rogel to me was fantastically done throughout here. You really felt the man beneath the Praetorian, the faults between the words. But as it was, Rogel then asked her to put out the call to any and every loyal soul left, to come and help the Emperor, that nothing else mattered anymore. And so she would, not knowing how or where she would do so, but simply that she would try. Eventually continuing on, Rogel would find Valdor being ambushed by Abaddon and the Justirin, where through the events they would ultimately escape to continue their rush to the Emperor's side, thanks to the rage-maddened Blood Angels arriving and assaulting Abaddon and his forces. It was interesting to see Rogel and Valdor paired up here in this situation, with both characters receiving little signs and aspects of themselves we're previously not used to seeing. The more human aspects to both their personalities. The sheer pressure and strain on Valdor at being away from the Emperor's side. For Vulcan and Malkador back in the throne room, they don't get a ton of page time in this one. Malkador still somehow hanging on, can see Vulcan preparing to use the talisman to destroy Terra, waiting as long as he can. And there was a nice little poignant moment where Malkador calls him my son, and reflects why it had to be Vulcan to shoulder this burden. Always the most pure of all the Primarchs. Vulcan can't hear him, believing Malkador is dead, which to all intents and purposes he pretty much is. But it's just a nice little few seconds amid the carnage of everything else. How Malkador cares for the Primarchs, and the unique qualities that makes Vulcan the Lord of Drakes. When Vulcan was originally seen to be standing guard in the throne room, I thought we'd get a scene of him going ballistic with the hammer at the mouth of the portal or something, just smacking demon home runs as he desperately attempted to hold back the tide. But we didn't. Instead, with the assault on the vengeful spirit, Vulcan's story instead morphed into more a sense of command and shouldering of responsibility. It was good to see how Vulcan dealt with that, and how it had to be Vulcan. But I'll admit, I thought when he stood there with that hammer and let them come back at the end of Old Earth, I'd thought he'd be a little bit more action involved. And of course there's countless other side stories and narratives going on throughout here. Still the siege being fought, Foe making his doomsday weapon which would be named the Terminus Decree, wink wink nod nod, and many others. But of course it would all boil down to the fight, Horus versus the Emperor. The Emperor and his companions would eventually make it to the War Master, and there they would find Sanguinius's slain body crucified to the wall. Now, the Emperor had already separated off his humanity, or at least most of it, and sent it off somewhere back in Volume 2. So we didn't get much of a reaction to this, as you might expect. However, he did order the others to take Sanguinius's body down, which again to me is telling. That it's a sight even without most of his humanity, the Emperor just doesn't want to see. That Sanguinius deserves more than that. A true loyal son. And I couldn't help but wonder there if the Emperor took that as a sign he has a hope. As back when he found his strategy and path forward in the game of Regicide with Malkador, the angel did fall there too. And of course it was what Sanguinius foresaw. We'll never know, but I was wondering just what went through the Emperor's head here, without that human element of anger and grief. Was there a part of him that was analysing the situation, and that he still had a hope of victory? Now, the fight itself was told through Horus's perspective in its entirety pretty much. Beginning with the Emperor asking why, and stating his son is dead. Before Horus realised the Emperor wasn't even talking to him, but to the shadows behind him, the Chaos Gods. Talking about Horus, not to him. Which was the perfect symbol for all of it, because it's always been the Emperor versus Chaos. They have always been the true enemy. And it's not even truly Horus anymore. It was chaos. Utterly and completely. Their fight is beyond all scope of description and comprehension. Beyond anything we have ever seen before. And most likely will again. Psychic as much as physical. We got them teleporting to Cathonia, the Warp, to Malek. Fighting in a dozen aspects all at once. It was a battle of gods in every single way. How on earth author Dan Abnett even began to bring it all to life, I will never know. And it was just jaw-dropping. Simply jaw-dropping. But one theme was subtly unwinding to become dominant throughout. As much as a master of his power as the Emperor was, he simply wasn't powerful enough. As much damage as he unleashed on Horus, the power of the gods simply was too much, and Horus gradually just battered the Emperor into exhaustion, beyond the point of any physical pain. What the Emperor goes through here, is beyond description. We got the honours to the myths and legends, the custodian Kaikautus sacrificing himself, standing before the Emperor, and the sacrifice of Alanius' person. In realising they had the Aphame blade still, they returned to give it to the Emperor. Ol convinces Grammaticus to escape to continue laying the thread of their path, before placing the dagger in the seemingly unconscious Emperor's hand, before being annihilated by Horus. Back on Terra, Sigismund led Keeler and the refugee pilgrims to the Hollow Mountain, where the Dark Angels would take them in. And as they mounted a furious last stand against Typhus and the Death Guard, the call to arms that Rogel sent Acte to send out sounded out. And I've got to be honest here, this gave me absolute chills. A call to arms for every single loyal son or daughter to fight, to advance on the enemy, to get to their Emperor, because he needs you. If any of you have seen the 90s film First Night, where Connery lets out the fight yell to Camelot, for all of Camelot to fight as he gets plastered with arrows. Oh, this was it, but magnified to 1,000,000. It was just so inspiring. Just feeling that ring out across Terra. And Cypher and the Dark Angels realise the psychic effect Keeler and all the refugees and pilgrims have, and that possibly it can be used to light the Astronomicon. And so in that moment, they pray the Emperor must live. In what can only be described as a 40k version of the beacons being lit, all across Terra, the blink of power, of interruption, is seen and heard, and the Astronomicon flares into life. Oh my god, that was awesome. Seeing the traitor fleet in orbit being absolutely devastated by it. The retreated battle fleet Solar saying to hell with it, we're going in. Guilliman seeing it and saying my father cannot fight alone. I was leaping out of my chair. I cannot describe how adrenaline pumping that was for me. The entire race of mankind, loyalist at least, giving their all for the Emperor. It's gotta go down as one of, if not the greatest moments in 40k history. I'm listening to the audiobook version now for my second read through, and I'm telling you, when I get to that part with Jonathan Keeble narrating it, I'm gonna have to be out on a run or have a punch bag in the room because it's gonna be overwhelming. Because it's gonna be absolutely epic. Now, Horus, witnessing this, shoved Loken away and immediately brought his maul down and crushed the fallen Emperor's skull. And from the ecstatic high of the Astronomicon being lit, straight to that, I was an emotional wreck, wondering what on earth was going on. The Emperor had just had his skull crushed. He's gone. Dead. What kind of twist was this? But there, as Horus reflected on his victory, the subtle cracks of what he'd done, the man he was within, aghast, just subtly began to become apparent. Horus called over Loken to help this annihilated body of his father be laid to rest, and Loken begins to ask Horus to lay the power of the gods aside, that he'd won, show he is a man within after all, that he had the one thing his father didn't, a heart. And ultimately, Horus ends up agreeing that he would release the dark power of the gods just for a moment to prove he could. And as Horus does this, he hears the prayer of the people of Terra, the people of mankind, praying the Emperor must live. And Horus realizes he's been tricked, desperately trying to draw in the dark power of the gods once more. The body of the Emperor vanished, and Horus sees the true Loken across the room, where he'd thrown him. The Loken with Horus is revealed to be the Emperor, and within his eyes is the faith, the support, the loyalty of mankind. The Emperor and mankind together. Now the fight was even, as Horus was desperately trying to draw the Dark God's power back in. The Emperor received even more horrific injuries, his windpipe crushed and an eye being torn out. But eventually the Emperor gained the upper hand, and as Horus begged and pleaded for the gods to give him the power back, which they would, only after watching him being tortured for a few moments longer, he realized then just what a slave he was. Nothing more than a tool of their will. And so voicelessly, through his eyes alone, he begged his father for forgiveness to end him, before the gods took full control once more. And as the dark gods panic-strickenly try to feel their power back into Horus, the Emperor does, psychically telling Horus, "I wait for you, I forgive you." He drove the Aphame dagger into Horus's heart, filling it full of all his will and power, destroying him completely. Now, did that mean the Emperor had been waiting the entire time for that true Horus to return, biding his time as much as he could? Most likely. Quite possibly. But those real deep conversations are for another day. As I said in the non-spoiler reaction, I was just overwhelmed with all of it. Just the magnitude of the moment. Seeing this legendary moment, the moment, actually play out. After this, we had Rogel and Constantine find the bodies, and Rogel poignantly recovering the skull of his brother Ferrus Manus. Rogel realizing the Emperor and Malcador had left a message through the tarot that he was to be taken back to the throne, and so that's what they do. Though they believed it was to save the Emperor's life, in truth it was more the other way around. The Emperor being placed on the throne, still saving humanity. The Blood Angels carry the body of their fallen lord, and Loken remains by Horus's side, refusing to leave with Rogel and the others. We got a brief reunion with him and Abaddon, where I was really wondering where Loken's future was going to go. But he was ultimately stabbed in the back and killed by Erebus, with a Aphame dagger, hinted at as being the birth of Samus. It was very shocking, but thinking on it, Loken's story really did have to end here. It had to die with Horus. Not just Horus, but Horus Lupercal, the last loyal son of the Lunar Wolves falling beside him. It was the perfect poetic ending. Even his reunion with Abaddon, not attacking each other, just talking, as the former brothers they were. It was a moment in time they both recognised. I was a little disappointed we didn't get the Malcador saving a portion of his strength for the Emperor when he got returned to the throne room, as the Visions of Heresy I think it was previously had told us. Which I admit was a bit of a shame, just because you know how much I love Malcador. But we at least got to see his true end and goodbye, as Rogel and Vulcan lifted him off the throne. There's really nothing else I can say other than what I did previously. It'll take some time and many read-throughs to truly appreciate everything that's transpired. It's just a truly overwhelming and amazing read. All in all, undoubtedly, the most important read in Horus Heresy 40k history. And it definitely delivered. It definitely delivered. But as always everyone, what did you think? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.